live. Welcome again, once again to Talkin Guff podcast with myself, Ruben Django Pouch, and
Benjamin Franklin.
Benjamin Franklin. So look, we're going to get straight into it because I think we got a lot to cover today. Just, we went in the other day to the anti-lockdown protest in RT and then mooched down to Herbert Park to check it out. I just wanted to say quickly that I suppose the catalyst for me wanting to go in and check it out was after the last one. I was reading articles in the Irish Independent and the Irish Times, and to me the articles smacked a bit. I thought something didn't quite add up. They were quoting heavily the Garda Commissioner, and sorry Len, do you want to close that? They were quoting heavily the Garda Commissioner, and one thing that I noticed that came up loads of times was there were hundreds of protesters, and I just thought quite obviously that there was more than hundreds of people there. That was just my opinion looking at it. And again, I've discussed before how I'm not the biggest fan of the Irish Times and the Irish Independent, and I just felt that there was a lack of transparency there, and there was a couple of things that I didn't like about the look of that protest. Like, I didn't like the way when the people got up to the top of Grafton Street, there was a sort of militarised faction of masked Gardaí with batons drawn. And I just think that that's not really acceptable. Regardless of anything, I believe in the right to protest, I believe in the right to assembly, and I believe that we own St. Stephen's Green, and if we want to go and congregate there to discuss mental health issues, to discuss other social issues that are real, then that is our right to do so. And I just felt then that the guards had created a system that would eventually end in some sort of melee, which we saw it did. From what I understand of people who were at the march that day, and again, this is why I wanted to go in, because I'm just listening to sort of second-hand reports either from the Irish Independent, Irish Times, or people I know, but they were definitely conflicting narratives. A friend of mine had said that it was a great day with thousands of people there expressing concerns for their mental health, people who had lost partners to suicide, lost their businesses, and that, of course, with any of these things, there was a faction of sort of Rullia. And I mean, if we really want to trace it back, you could say that the people who create that Rullia could in fact be disenchanted from a lack of amenities, a lack of infrastructure that our government hasn't provided for them. And so, I mean, you could trace it back to those social issues as well, but there's always going to be that faction. And like I said, I wanted to go in just to sort of have a look for ourselves, or have a look for myself as what the situation was. Just maybe, because another thing that I really thought was, like I said already, I don't want to live in a world where there's militarised, faceless Gardaí there with batons drawn. And a quote that really struck with me from the Garda Commissioner in the Irish Independent was, "We will pursue anyone engaged in illegal activity and protest." And I mean, it's the Guards' prerogative to pursue anyone engaged in illegal activity, but the bit that really made me go, what was the "we will pursue anyone engaged in illegal activity and protest." Yeah. And I take exception to that. I don't want to live in that world. And another quote by the Garda Commission was, "These people had no right to be there." And I thought then that the narrative in our own national publications was diminishing, was purely focusing on the malevolent forces at hand within the protest, which there's always going to be. And a friend of mine's telling me that's a minority, and they totally diminish and dismiss what could have potentially be the majority of people who have serious issues to discuss. We've spoke before many times, or a few times I've said I wanted to do a COVID or a coronavirus podcast. And so I suppose actually the coronavirus is multifaceted. The coronavirus itself is quite a contentious issue. I don't have the expertise. I haven't even read enough or tried to get enough of my own opinion to sort of come and do a podcast about it, I don't feel. So we said we'd do one about lockdown. Because lockdown, the parameters of lockdown are probably slightly more transparent or easier to see, or definitely with the language easier to discern, because a lot of the medical jargon, whatever you want to call it, sort of goes over my head on both sides, for both sides of the argument. And it's looking like now there are two sides of this argument. It does look like that to me, should I say. And so, two things. This podcast is not going to be about COVID. It's going to be lockdown. It's going to be about a lockdown. We're going to maybe discuss our own opinions on lockdown and who benefits from it, home and abroad. I think there's sort of some easy things to discuss really quickly. Another part of it is I've actually, and then just in the interest of full disclosure, I went, like, I was up mad late reading stuff and not following sort of, I got all my stuff from sort of Wikipedia, the Irish Examiner. Like, I didn't find obscure articles that validate my point.
Reputable sources.
Well, yeah, if you want to call them reputable sources, but definitely more socially acceptable sources of information, media, whatever it is. And so with that in mind, I am going to be barreling through a lot of stuff, and I know I say it all the time. I know I'm dominant in this dynamic at times, but I'm just trying to, because I'm not going to talk too much about my thoughts. There's just so much information to share with you, in my opinion, that we're going to be moving it along quickly enough, if that's all right with you. And it's just to sort of get through a couple of interesting points that I thought were there, and because I want to get your take on what I think are interesting points. And so there's a bit to get through, so we're going to keep it snappy where we can. Is that all right?
Sure, man, for
At
sure.
the risk of sort of fucking strong-arming, anything like that. So, first of all, I thought basically, Len, you could maybe talk about the day, like, give us a rundown of the day there. Like we said, we went out to town, so Len's going to just give us a brief overcap of the day and more just the events of it, like, because it was a bit of crack as well, actually, we have to admit.
It was actually, man, it was great fucking crack. Yeah, like, I mean, look, we were running through all the nightmare scenarios the day before, which was a million things, from getting batting charged by police on horses to, you know, because they were this is the thing, they were talking it up. They've been talking up anyone we'd spoken to. People had said, oh, that was, when was the original now?
Must be 2.5 weeks ago. I think it was a Saturday fortnight. You know, the Saturday previous to Wednesday fortnight.
That's right. Yeah. Because they said, yeah, exactly. Because they'd all been saying, oh, that was just like a dress rehearsal for this one and all this kind of stuff. And they were expecting, and there was like 2,500 Gardaí. I think that was all over the country, but obviously a lot of them deployed around.
Massive amount of them would have been deployed for Dublin. I would assume.
Exactly. Everyone was saying to us we were stupid for going in, and that you know, for any number of reasons, and that we weren't going to get in anyway because the Garda presence is going to be so tight. And also I had a fear of, you know, kind of like getting caught in a mob of people who you know, from what the reports had been given, were, you know, there was potentially going to be violence going on.
Yeah.
And also just catching this fucking disease, which none of us
understand. And it's funny, well, I'd say that, like, throughout the day, like on the way home, I was thinking that was great, and there was also parts of it that were really sociable in ways, and then I actually felt like this pang of guilt or irresponsibility on the way home. And again, I think that's something we'll address because what I was thinking was eventually we would do a podcast about COVID. And now that's something not necessarily, and it's something me and you can parlay on, you know, in the future. But I found, like, just to say, I agree with you. I found at times I was just like, oh shit, what am I doing?
That's an anxiety that, like, I think we've developed
it's brand new.
Absolutely.
Brand new, because we'd never have been in a situation where that anxiety was necessary. I'm not even saying that. In fact, I think no anxiety is necessary. But even there was just no catalyst for that type of anxiety, that brand of anxiety that we're in now, as a result of lockdowns and the coronavirus, I suppose.
Absolutely. But we say that's the same way. When we got together and we got all the gear on, I was feeling pretty excited, because I was like, oh, well, we're actually doing this now. Do you know what I mean? We're actually going to go in there. And all of those fears, as it turned out, were totally fucking misplaced. Like, as soon as the first clue was, we got on the bus and there was just nobody else. There
was no one
on the bus, not a soul.
And that was at what, 12 o'clock?
Yeah, just before 12, I would say.
Yeah. And just because I'm paranoid, we're still all good there. Okay.
Yeah, still rocking. But we got in and we arrived at the first checkpoint, and that was sort of the moment of truth then, I guess, because we get there.
So what happens, just so Len, for the people, we're on the bus and you say we get to the first checkpoint. What happened then exactly? Because I tell you, that's something that I've never in my whole entire life seen before.
Yeah, guards pulling a bus to the side.
So the guards pulled a bus to the side to board it. I've never in my... And you can take from that what you want, but that, like... I've never seen that. I've never seen anything remotely like that.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
It is mad, man, to think. I mean, I've seen guard at checkpoints where they're waving drivers on through because they're looking for fucking Kinnahans or whatever. You know what
I've
I
never
mean?
seen them stop a bus and get on a bus and question people as to what they're doing.
Board a bus and get on. And it does feel a bit like, I know that stuff happens on borders all over the place.
A bit of a Children of Men vibe off it, wasn't
yeah, there is. There's suddenly a kind of, Steiner Papillon. Yeah. That's not to, I've just watched
Nazi.
so many movies. Yeah, exactly. That's not to throw the guards under the bus either. But they got on. We saw them get on. I immediately shat myself.
I was a little bit like, oh Jesus, I wonder how it's gonna go down. All right.
And me and Rob looking at you like, you're doing the talking, right, Ruben? And Ruben's like, yeah, I'll do the talking.
Ultimate shit talk here.
Yeah.
What's up, guy?
And they just literally came to the top of the stairs, looked down the bus, saw there was no one there, looked at us, said, all right, lads, what are you up to? Now, already, their tone was... I didn't sense from them that they already seemed like, okay, these guys look a bit more whatever. I didn't get the sense from them right away that they were maybe they were sussing us up. But as soon as he said, "And are you outside your 5K?" and straight away we were just like, yeah, we're from Bray. And as soon as then he was like, oh, okay,
what are you up to?
Yeah.
And what we did was we referenced figure 9.2 of the remit, which was allowed for essential business, information and communication for internet purposes. And that's exactly what we said to the guy, and we're making around. And that was enjoyable, wasn't it?
That was amazing. I have to say, when you broke out, we're just here exercising our right or our duty under Section 9, Paragraph 2 of the Code of Restrictions. Immediately, it was like he just came a little bit and went, oh, okay.
Because he's like, fair enough, boys.
Fair enough, boys. And then
he almost became apathetic to the situation. He's like, oh, just whatever, mate. You've obviously put a bit of effort into this one.
As soon as you start quoting things at me, I was like,
oh, fucking, yeah, whatever, mate. Good luck to you.
But I refer you to the People versus Mulroney.
The judging his ship.
Yeah, he just goes, and he just walked off. And from then on, we were like,
press do whatever the fuck they want.
Whooping and hollering. It made us reason. And look, but that's legitimate. We weren't chancing our arm. We weren't breaking restrictions. We had every right to be there.
100%. And we will have a little video of our, like, we went out and interviewed people and spoke to some people. What about the fact that a lot of people, I mean, me and Len looked like Mormons, like the Church of Latter-day Saints. And I think we're doing a bit of podcast, wondering if you want to have a conversation with us, people are just like, no.
Rob put it so well, it was like, well, you need to appear so legit to get through the Garda cordon, and then you want to appear as fucking
where's my board shorts and the dollar bill hat.
Exactly. Yeah,
but I also think we didn't have to look like we did. All you have to do is turn up with a camera and say you're press, and no one says a word.
100%, man. That's the because when
there was a guy that was in my school, but he didn't look like he was. He just looked like he got out of bed.
Yeah, we made passes and everything. No, there were guys just showing up there with a big camera, take photos after we'd arrived and everything. Yeah, that was so that was kind of an eye opener as well. But even people were saying things to us like. Me and Rob over just side of the road, and these two guys go past. They're like, the real photos today, lads, yeah? Like, in other words, you're not going to be giving us the same shtick RTE was giving.
And I think that's fair enough. I was actually upset. I was annoyed when I read the Irish Times article, when I read the Independent one especially. I was just like going, how dare you? Like, how dare you, like, just spin one side, or show one side of the narrative that potentially is legitimate and potentially holds water, but there's so much more at play there that holds water. And I consistently see the Irish Times just like, almost like being just a total think piece for Fine Gael, the Fine Gael Fianna Fáil coalition. It's just like, what do you need from us today, lads? How do you want us to spin whatever issue's going on? It's just like,
it's kind of like, in a way, the sort of I'm going to say the Michael Moore thing, and I like a lot of Michael Moore's work or whatever.
I fucking hate him.
But see,
I like him at the same time in a weird way.
This is the thing. Like,
apparently he's a tall biased bastard.
See, this is the thing. I that's what I've heard as well. That like he basically like I would agree with a lot of his politics or whatever.
He's like inverted CNN or something.
But he kind of fudges things or fakes things.
I believe he fudges stuff and fakes them and does sensationalization, like sensationalizes certain procedures. Like, I think even so far back as Bowling for Columbine,
Yeah.
you couldn't actually do what he said you could. You couldn't go to the bank and get that gun that day.
He that's exactly
He had it set up in a way.
He goes in there, sets up an account, and then 3 days later, when he's been vetted and it's all cleared, he goes in there, but he's wearing the same thing as he was wearing 3 days ago.
For me, if
So
you're a
that it
documentary
looks
filmmaker
like,
and you're
yeah.
doing that, you're out.
We see this
You're
that's,
out. I'm sorry. I mean,
yeah.
they're great documentaries. He's a great filmmaker.
But that's a really good side of the debate is, in a way, and I'm not justifying. I would be of your mindset. I would, but you know, he almost justifies it by going, well, if it's
Someone has to fight our fight.
exactly,
There's
yeah.
so much fighting that fight. Who's fighting our fight?
And they have no,
that's
they're
a valid
unscrupulous
point as
about
well.
lies
They're
and everything like
unscrupulous
that.
about
Yeah.
lies and stuff.
So in other words, that RTE are thinking, well, we know that however hard it is, the lockdown is justified. So who cares if that the ends justify the means?
I know, but but at the same time, they're only saying the ends justify the means because they're unwilling to look at the conversation that people against the narrative are having.
Yeah.
Now, just because you said there, we're talking about honesty and unbiased and all, so let's segue into, there was no one, when we turned up at 12:30 to RTE, there was literally no one there.
Bagel. It was us and about 20 guards.
Yeah.
That was about it.
And to be honest, by the time we left at 2 o'clock to go down to Herbert Park, or after 2, and it was meant to be from 2 o'clock the protest, there was only really 20, 30 people there.
Yeah.
And again, like, there's no point in avoiding this or saying, like, I tell you what I found, something that I took a negative, if I had to criticize the movement or the protests in any way, this is what I would say, is that I didn't find her, like, when there's only 20 odd people there at RTE, I didn't find there to be any cohesion. Like, numerous times throughout today I was looking around going, who the fuck is in charge? And if there's a thing over there down in Herbert Park, and there's a thing potentially in the GPO, and none of them, and apparently another thing, a thing that was said often was that the guards had really suppressed any traffic in and out of town. And so Len made the point, it's like, well, what if you got on the bus and you didn't have your little story? But I know a lad, I seen a lad there at RTE, and I was like, oh, you came in, he's like, yeah, the guards got on the bus. I just said, I'm getting off the next stop. And he's like, fine.
Yeah, okay.
So who knows? But he's got a bit of gumption about him anyway. To sort of, whereas I might go, I'm just. But I definitely found that there was like these factions. Like, there's 4 different people going on, and they all have a common thread denominator. But then there's all these extra little bits that they're talking about, and so no one's coming along. I feel like it could really do with someone just coming along going, look, everyone has valid points, but let's focus on the one common denominator, centralise and mobilise as one to deal with that. Because, and again, let's be honest here, there were few people, and we interviewed 1 or 2 of them, where I just thought they seemed a bit crazy, or they seemed like their ideas were too far-fetched. Parts of what they were talking about were just too out there for me to get on board with, because I'm like going, that's just like your own personal thing, and it's damaging to the one collective thing that I think people really need to deal with. I know, because you have to be real, like, there were people there, like, at one point I saw, I don't know how to say this now without, like, well, one thing I said to you lads at the time is I was talking to a gentleman who wouldn't be recorded on any grounds, but he was making some really good points. Now, he was giving us the whole, did you know that, 100 years ago and all of this stuff. But one thing I noticed about him, he kept going, like, look at these fucking idiots with their masks. I mean, he was making some valid points, this guy. But then there was too much diatribe in it, and it was like, look at your man, that's a young, healthy man with that fucking mask. He's a fucking idiot for wearing that. And and I had to say, look, bro, can I just maybe play devil's advocate here for a minute and just say that I think the mask is pretty innocuous, actually. And I understand what you're saying, that it's a precursor and you're under control. It's like, but another point that I make is, like, if you point at that guy and call him a fucking idiot for wearing a mask, you've cut off a potential ally.
Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah.
I said this, I don't fucking need anyone. Do you know how many people that fought in the 1916 rise and all that? I was like, look, mate, I just think that the only way, as soon as you do that, you've just shut yourself off from maybe a demographic who would have been willing to have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
And the flip side of that, or way in which we were standing there before anyone turned up at RT. I mean, we were the first people there. There was 30, 40 guards or whatever it was, and us, three lads. And a woman jogs by at this point,
right.
and she sort of stops outside RT and she's going, "Who's the celebrity?" And we were like, "What? Like, why is all the guards here? What's all the commotion? Like, what are you doing here?" And we were like, "No, apparently there's a massive protest, anti-lockdown protest planned here for today." And she was like, "Oh my God."
Bye.
Yeah, but she even said, "That's awful, isn't it?" And I'm not criticizing her thought process really if she thinks that this, and again, I'm not getting into coronavirus, if she thinks lockdowns are necessary and thinks people protesting them is awful, then that's her right. But at the same time, it's just like, love, this has been all over the media for the last 3 days, and you obviously live in the locale because you're on your jog, and you don't have a fucking clue that it's going on. And for me, I just definitely, regardless of what your point of view on lockdown or corona, it's like, how fucking out of touch are you that's just like, here's the celebrity.
Yeah.
And you're just like going, oh, right. And then another thing I noticed when we're walking down to Herbert Park is, this is a different world. Lockdown, I would assume, is different for these people.
Yeah.
You know, take from that what you will. And money. They have more money. So lockdown is easier. Their husbands they have jobs that aren't necessarily affected in the same way. They don't, from what I can see, have the same financial and career issues. Just looking around at the money on the streets or driving the houses.
Man, and do you know what, I'd say this, and when I went out there, because we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks, and I was sort of like, yeah, that'll be, in my head, like, that'll be gas, won't it, going out there, you know, getting those sort of all gas, no brakes, sound bites of just these whack jobs shouting into a microphone. That was my sort of thing. Until having chatted to you, whatever, by the time we actually got out there, and when you actually get out there, and undeniably the grief and the suffering among people, you know what I mean, among people who were chatting to and who you're seeing around.
Because we did see that shit.
That is
like
real.
we did. Like we spoke to a couple, and I'm really grateful to them. We didn't ask anyone's names, but they'll be up on a little video. A couple outside RT, and I'm really grateful to them for chatting with us because they had some really succinct points to make. They weren't emotive or, you know, they weren't spouting a diatribe. They were just saying, well, we think there's an issue with this, that, and the other, and that's what I want to happen.
Yeah.
And I don't want those people to feel like they can't express that opinion for fear of like flaunting public safety or being conspiracy theorists or whatever else people are getting thrown at them at the moment, and that's happening. Like.
And it makes you, just like you're saying about when you're walking around the area out there on Herbert Road and all in Donnybrook, like lockdown is affecting us, you know, different levels of society.
Of course, but that's always the same, and the more affluent members of society in these greater good situations don't suffer.
They don't suffer the same. It's like me and Rob were chatting about it yesterday, and we were saying it's like if everyone's in like a jacuzzi or a heated pool or even a bath, some people, you know, and you might be sitting in water that's at 30 degrees and there's others sitting in 25 and 20 and 10, and then with a lockdown it's like everyone just turned the temperature down 5 degrees, right?
Yeah.
So the people who are at 30 degrees are now at 25, the people who are at 25 are now at 20, but the people who are at 10 are now at 5, and the people who are at 5 are sitting in a fucking block of ice.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
So the people who are still sitting in a 25-degree jacuzzi are going, would you ever give over? It's only...
Yeah, it's tepid.
It's tepid. It's just a little bit chilly. Go on, the fucking wolf, the rosé is still chilled or whatever. Whereas there's other motherfuckers who are literally freezing or dying of pneumonia. Do you know that kind of way?
Yeah, of course.
So it's a totally different...
Totally different, and I mean...
spectrum.
Exactly. And we spoke to a guy, I think he must be Northern Ireland. Like, those kids mentioned that they're worried about their kids, 13 and 14 years of age. I'm worried about my kid, 8 years of age, and how subconsciously or in a non-quantifiable way this is having a negative effect on him now, and it will be quantifiable in a certain period of time down the road or whatever. And you know, there was another guy who said he hadn't seen his daughter. I think that guy nearly started crying. He hadn't seen his daughter in a year or something like this. And so, like just trying to wrap up that point I made earlier, I saw later on, I think more people did turn up at RT after we'd been there, because I did see a march of more people than we had seen for definite, a photo of. But like some of the placards, and this is what I just felt like, we tried to talk to some of these people and they're like, no. And I even noticed some of the people that I tried to ask, would you have a chat with us in this photo, and they're like, no. And it's just like, and again, like that guy is going on about, and then he's going, look at these fucking idiots. A lot of these people have points, and there is a common thread there. But when you pull out a sign, as one of these people had, I seen in this photo, like, we won't have our countries run by commies or something. I'm just like, you know, you're fucking us here, love.
Yeah.
You're fucking us. And it needs some cohesive, fucking articulate, non-emotive human being with facts to go, yeah, look, you can be part of the like protest because we need as many people as possible, but like, let's really try and focus the reality of the situation, the reality of our gripe, and leave any of this sort of commie shit and out of it, because you do have a real enemy, and it's not communism, it's neo-capitalism, like de facto imperialism almost. That's your enemy. It's not commies, and I just think someone needs to help rein certain factions of that in order to communicate to that woman. If you saw a sign to that woman that's going, who's the celebrity about commie Ireland? She's out. And you might say, I don't give a fuck, but actually we need as many people in order to achieve social to heal or mend social issues that we think are. Surely we need as many people involved and reading from the same hymn sheet as possible.
100%, man. Yeah,
that's what I think. And that's really fucking hard for me. I would rather go, no, fuck her and fuck him and let's fucking burn the whole place down. Yeah. But I'm evolving. I'm trying to sort of go, I don't think that's how you achieve shit, Ruben. Every time you lose your cool in other parts of your life, it goes tits up. So
yeah. Well, I think that's the major division between all of this is what they call the knowledge illusion, which is the idea that you as a human being can know what the situation is. Do you know what I mean? We don't. The whole basis of human civilization is that we departmentalized. Do you know what I mean? It used to be that you were a hunter-gatherer, you knew how to make a fire, build a hut, skin a rabbit, and then eventually somebody was like, hey, what if I learn how to make huts really well and you learn how to cook? And so we all learn a thing. So the idea and that's where the big division is. Like, we got chatting to a guy walking along towards Herbert Park who started, I can't remember, he started in on Ireland being part of some Commonwealth thing. And then remember he said, you think you're living in a republic, don't you? See, blah, blah, blah. And straight away, it's like you were saying about your man, straight away it's like, dude, don't come at this with a fucking you don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Because you're just
patronising.
You're not thinking for yourself. It's like
no one's
thinking for themselves. No one thinks for themselves, okay? Everyone, we all fucking rely on the word of other people, right?
Yeah.
That's why lies hurt. That's why someone insulting you hurts, even if you know it isn't true, because your concept of the truth is partial. It's based on what other people around you think.
Cool, that's interesting actually, then, because I would have thought, I would like to think, that's interesting, I like that point, sorry.
Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, so, 100%.
So it's kind of, it becomes a division. We all do the group thing. We all rely on, like I don't fucking, because I don't know how to make shoes. I don't know how to...
fucking idiot.
You fucking, you know what I mean? If I get sick...
fucking...
Like, they go on about, oh, you're not doing the investigating, you're not really thinking for yourself. It's like, well, you're not thinking for yourself either. You just quoted me some fucking article that you read. How do you know he isn't lying to you? How do you know the guy who wrote that on whatever? Because he's not he doesn't work for RTE.
Neither do I, motherfucker. Talk to me.
He writes a blog or whatever. It's like, yeah, so he's got nothing to lose. Like, he doesn't give a shit. I'm not saying either one of them is right. I'm just saying
there's parts of that shit that those lads talk that actually interest me. I want to know why all the solicitors in this country have to pass the British Accredited Registry. I want to know why all the barristers go to King's Inn and stuff like this. There is still this like little colonial element in our society. I'm willing to talk about that. But like you said, when it comes, and it's just like going, yeah, because another thing we were having a laugh about is like when we were up in the Herbert Parkland, it ties into what you're saying here. there was a girl going on about, is this what Wolf Tone? And you're like going,
The classic, was it for this?
yeah, that's
it
what you
for
were saying.
this? Yeah,
And this
yeah,
guy,
yeah.
I'm like going, yeah, I understand the sentiment, what you're talking about. And I understand that just, because basically what you're getting at is like, actually what's happening, and we know, you can say it's happening under the legislation, coronavirus suppression legislation, or whatever the thing is, but it is technically unconstitutional.
Yeah.
It's technically, like, you know, the amendments to our Health Act of 42 or 47, I can't remember, the 2020 amendment that takes the power of lawmaking, policy making out of the Oireachtas and into the hands of individual cabinet members, that is against the Constitution. And you can argue that, and both sides of the argument are valid, and I think that's where like guys like this are trying to come from.
Yeah.
But I feel like, Owen, look around you, mate. Look at the demographic. You know, you don't have to associate it with this sort of, and it's not aggressive Irish nationalism, I don't think.
No.
I didn't get that impression. I'm not saying these are like fucking Ireland for Ireland heads at all.
We didn't see any violence either.
Didn't see
whatsoever.
one bit
Didn't
of
see
violence.
One thing kicking off. It's too nice a day. But anyway.
Too nice a day. But I just thought then, just like, just contemporise your narrative, your dialogue a bit to fold these people who don't give a fuck about Wolf Tone into the conversation. Yeah. And you can just do that by really quickly, and you spend 10 minutes going on about, you just go, you know, we think it's, you know, these parts of it are unconstitutional, and talk about the actual issue, the parameters of the issue today, and deal with it. And that's, again, these people are doing more than me. They're organising events and they're starting conversations, so I'm not disparaging. I just think that maybe, again, how can we figure out a way just to broaden the scope and include all demographics, you know, regardless of race, creed, financial standings, etc., etc. Yeah. And I think the best way to do that is be rational about, talk about things you could see, and that's why we're doing a lockdown protest. We just want to talk about what we can see without throwing out sort of ambiguous, you know, fucking facts, figure statements. Anyway, look, can I just say then, it was a great day. We had a great day, didn't we?
We actually did. Yeah, I felt terrific.
Yeah, it was good. Opinions on lockdown. I mean, can I give you my quick opinion on lockdown? Shoot. I don't think that lockdowns work at getting rid of coronavirus. We're not going to lock down for, in my opinion, we're not going to lock down for a certain period of time and coronavirus will disappear. I think that coronavirus is just going to get wherever it's going to get. I think if you look at the way, and we all championed the way New Zealand dealt with their coronavirus situation, and it had great effect, it would seem. But they still have rolling lockdowns in New Zealand.
Is that in New Zealand? Yeah.
Yeah,
sorry,
like it's still, and we looked at that as like the sort of, that's what we should be doing because that's how well it worked for them. But the fact of the matter is, like, when they're not getting rid of coronavirus through lockdowns.
Yeah.
That's what I see. And I think a long while back, like even now, we're in the midst of the largest lockdown in Europe, but it's not diminishing our numbers at a rate that would equate to that, as far as I can tell. Like, it was even in the...
Yeah. I think, first of all, New Zealand were able to shut out travel to their country.
But I think, even they've still shut out travel, yet variants of this disease are still finding their way into the country.
But they can literally say it was that tourist from...
But they still...
England,
okay, sorry, yeah.
do you know what I mean?
I understand that they can identify, but at the same time, they still have to lock down.
Sure,
and when they open back up, whether it's a tourist from wherever or whichever, because they have that mandatory quarantine, it still comes back around. Yeah. That's my point. And now, like, France is going back into lockdown because they're in their third wave. And I'm like, are some countries not in their fourth wave?
Yeah.
You know, and so again, it just sort of, for me, that adds to the fact that maybe it's, you know, I tell you what, I looked at a couple of really interesting things and we might put them up, and I don't know enough about this guy, so I should have researched some more, but Ivor Cummings, he's shown, and I'll have to see if it looked pretty legit. He had what he said was the European mortuary website, like RIP.E, but a European version of it. And it's not that, actually, because RIP.E is like funeral announcements or whatever. This is like the CSO death figures for Europe, say. And everyone everyone had an epidemic in the summer that sent, for the period of time that it occurred, the deaths were in excess of normal deaths or whatever. But for the rest of the year, there's no excess of death.
Right, this 2020 now.
2020, right? Apart from the epidemic in the thing, and some people have the resurgence numbers in sort of December. And so we'll pull that up. I would like to know, and again, the world we live in is there's just so much information, it's hard to pick through. But I was looking at other stuff he was talking about, and about general health stuff, and I was like, oh, this guy seems all right. Did you know, and I wasn't aware of this, that there's no lockdown in Florida?
At
They
all.
don't wear masks. They don't lock down.
Yeah,
nothing.
I think briefly there isn't at the moment. I think briefly they had to do some things, but yeah, they've got like a crazy gung ho governor down there.
Yeah, but they did a lockdown, and then this guy DeSantis, I think, turned around and said, "We're not doing this anymore." And according again to a thing I watched, and maybe I shouldn't even reference it because I was up late last night doing a bit of research, and that was one of the ones that I didn't follow back up 100%. So this probably turn around and bite us in the ass. He's a fucking whatever flat earther or something like that. So but he had graphs, he had these graphs that seemed pretty interesting, that sort of was like, yeah, they had their little thing that everyone in lockdown had, but then they're kicking ass in numbers in Florida
In terms of
COVID deaths and cases.
So they've got lots of them, is what you're saying?
No,
They've got
the other
loads
way.
of
They're
deaths.
kicking
Really?
ass. They're beating the rest of the country.
Well, you see, basically, I think it has a lot to do with how many deaths are you as a nation or as a whatever, as a people, willing to tolerate, right? Like in Britain, they have been locking down and stuff, but it's definitely been a bit looser. It wasn't pushed as much. I've one of my best mates over there who was telling me, it's kind of confusing. The government were recommending more things. Boris is coming out and saying, don't go to the pub, but we're not going to close the pub. But maybe just have the 2 ales.
I sort of think that's the way it should be, though.
But this is what I'm saying. Look at their deaths are up to 120,000.
Yeah.
Whereas our deaths are at 5,000 or something like that. No, I know there's no comparison in population, but they're
no comparison in population.
10 times bigger than us. So even if...
They're 12 times bigger than us.
So even if you multiply that out, you're looking at
60,000.
60,000. So
50,000.
Which is still half, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, in Ireland, I feel like in the Republic, and this is what the government probably felt like, we cannot... I'm almost bet you they had someone in to calculate what was the ratio of deaths they thought would be palatable to the Irish people. And it was fucking low, man. Because for whatever reason, culturally over here, maybe it's a good thing, but we would not be able to handle the mass kind of death.
I think surely... well, I understand what you're saying, but I think if anyone, surely, the victims of colonialism oppressed for nearly 1,000 years, surely we can handle a few fucking deaths.
Yeah, I guess. I mean,
you're telling me over in London, you walk around London and look at those fucking latte morons, and they're not prepared for life in any way.
But even there was guys who
they're all crying into their fucking macchiato about their issues. And
was it for this?
Aaron Gabra.
Fucking no, I remember the NHS had all these stories of they had to recall their healthcare workers out of retirement, and there were all these stories of such and such, this old fella who came out, he was in his 60s and he came back to help out in the hospitals and died of coronavirus as a result, and they're kind of heroes. We've never fought a war, you see. We've never fought a war.
We brought the British Empire to its
knees. But I mean, since then, as a republic, we have never fought a war.
I understand.
We have never sent our, we've never sent our brave sons and daughters out and watched them die and calculated or measured a death toll by that.
I understand there. I do understand what you're saying.
It's a different thing. And I'm not saying, look, that's a really hard thing. And someone was like, would you like restrictions to have been eased, but therefore more people to have died? It's like, oh Jesus, I don't want somebody's granny to die. Because
I know, but do you not think that's totally weighted? Because then if I turn around and go, and I don't know what the numbers for suicide are in 2020. I'm really interested to see what the CSO figures for 2020 are. It's going to be very hard to find them. I tried to, and it's very ambiguous. It's like 6 parts per million of this and 7.1 of that, and But what I do know is that more people killed themselves in August last year than died from coronavirus. And that was a real turning point for me.
Yeah, no, that's
Because
crazy.
I was just like going, that, you know, and a woman makes a point that, like, I mean, there is a new virus out there that kills the weak and the vulnerable. I have no doubt about that. And that's as much as I'm willing to say about coronavirus. And again, I don't want us to go too far down into numbers or anything like that, because I got some crazy theories. And so we will go down a rabbit hole, and I'd rather refine those.
Yeah.
But, like, I just think for definite, it's starting to look like, I just can't see how, for me, I don't, you know, at one point they thought this was going to be a plague, basically, that could potentially kill like 30 million people in Europe, in Western Europe alone. That's not, obviously, look, let's not go down this route for right now.
Well, no, I get what you're saying, but I will say this.
I just think that, like, if obviously 500,000 people are unemployed, that's a fucking, and what, like, the repercussions, financial repercussions, there's so much gonna come down the track, and that's undeniable. And, like, obviously anxiety and depression is huge. Like, I'm depressed about the situation. I know friends of mine who are seriously depressed about the situation. I have huge anxiety coupled with our future and stuff like this that's been born out of this situation.
We're all utterly changed, man. We'll never be the same again.
And that's sort of, that, I don't like that.
Well, look,
but
that's
then again,
but the on the, just to count the balance, and you were talking about how the numbers sort of flatlined after the epidemic in the summer, and maybe that's because, undoubtedly, it is because of the intensity of the lockdown. And Ireland has one of the lowest death ratios, I'm pretty sure, in the world. Now,
then why do we have the longest lockdown? Because here's the other thing, Len.
They're one and the same thing, though. It's kind of like, if I'm not getting sick anymore, why do I have to keep taking the medicine? It's like you're not sick because you're taking the medicine.
But I don't think lockdown is a medicine. I think, like, it's not curing coronavirus. I just feel like that you're just delaying the inevitable.
I see what you're saying.
You're just delaying the inevitable at great cost, like huge cost, you know.
Whereas you look at
to normal everyday, because that's the other thing, and this is a sentiment that came up quite a few times with the people we interviewed, and I listened to the audio. It's like going, this is not, and we've said it already, it's like, this is not the same. This is having the worst effect. This is going to be the most detrimental to the people on the lowest rungs of society.
Yeah.
And that's not acceptable for me. And I believe that. I wholeheartedly believe that. And in fact, let's segue into now. I want to know who is benefiting, and we'll get into who's benefiting at home. But, like, even abroad, like, because one thing that's not a conspiracy theory is there has been a transfer of wealth in the last 12 months, the likes of which the world has never seen before.
Yeah.
And it is going to create, it's going to widen the gap between rich and poor, have and have-nots, which is massive already, even further. You know, in the Great Depression in the 20s or 30s or whatever it was, more millionaires are created in America throughout the Great Depression than had ever been created before. And that is going to happen again.
Yeah.
More billionaires are going to be created. It's not millionaires this time, it's billionaires this time.
Sure.
And to touch on it, like, even to make it, because I was reading a Forbes article about it, and this is not a conspiracy, this is happening. Massive amounts of money are being funneled out of the poorest pockets into the richest pockets. And here's one way in which that is happening, just as food for thought, is that the whole world is in a social economy almost. But it's not social, it's almost anti-social, because it's not like, here, this is a socialist idea and you get money to live and we're all looking out for each other. It's almost like quantitative easing, because trillions of monies, depending on what country you are, and it's happening all over the world, is being pumped into socialising the economy, like giving people money to float the economy. But because there's no... Sorry. Because there's no high street economies anymore, like you got down Bray Main Street, there's no small businesses open.
Yeah.
Right? So the money that's being given to everyone is actually only making its way back to the pockets of the richest people. There's no trickle down. We know this. That's why quantitative easing is a bad thing and they don't do it anymore, even in the States where they don't give a fuck about anyone. Because it never trickles down. It goes left and right. It only ever lines the pockets of the wealthiest people.
Just quantitative easing.
Quantitative easing is where you create money out of nothing that's not backed by any resource and you pump it into an economy. They do that in America all the time to the tune of $3 and $6 trillion. And evidence has shown, and Dave DeGraw, who started the 1% movement, talks about this. It just literally goes into Wall Street. And they say, oh, well, the trickle-down effect. But you see, and the trickle-down effect is proven to be bullshit. Yeah. But now, even more than ever, the trickle-down effect is not even a thing you could pretend anymore because the money is not being spent in any localized economies. Me, myself, have bought more products in the last 12 months off Amazon than I have ever before. In my whole entire life. Yeah. So like the 35 years, don't shake your fucking head at me. No, I feel you never have. I never had before. I got into it. I've now subsequently deleted my Amazon Prime account, deleted my Amazon.co.uk account. It's gone. I'm out. I'm not doing it anymore because Jeff Bezos as well grew by 100 billion or something like this.
Yes, crazy.
In a year. Man, and like we'll talk about in the future as well what he's doing with that money and the farmland he's buying up in the States along with other multi-billionaires. And again, do you want to let, as much as I don't want to let tech into my medicine, which will be something we talk about further down the line, I don't want to let tech into my food. Control oil, control countries, control food, control the people. That's a real fucking thing. Anyway, so that, even at that, there's no trickle down because it's literally just like all the money. And like I said, I've identified that issue and stopped doing it, but there's loads of people who haven't, and I'm not judging them. And like Louis thinks Amazon's a great thing because it gets whatever you want on it and it's cheap. And it's like, I'm trying to explain to him, yeah, but what Amazon do is they put a gun to people who, they don't produce anything, Amazon. Well, they do, but like not really. So they put a gun, just like the fucking, these group buyers for Tesco and other companies like that, Aldi and Lidl even, who go into farmers and get them over a barrel because they're going to buy 1 million of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you got to get eggs from wherever the fuck you can get them. We'll buy them all off you. We'll buy a year's supply of eggs off you. But you're only getting 50% or 30% of what you got. And unfortunately, and Lou's like, oh, well, they can just buy it off the shop directly. It's like, but people don't do that. It's too easy to go to Amazon. You can get it actually cheaper in Amazon than you can off the fucking direct website.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so for me, that's just one really obvious way, and that's not a conspiracy theory. That's one really obvious way in which billionaires are getting more billions. And I've said before, when there's so much money involved in something, like here's the thing, if you were a billionaire, or like when there's so much money involved, I don't trust it, I
There's
suppose.
an old expression, man, when there's blood on the streets, buy property. You ever heard that one?
Right, okay.
That's the same thing. It's like the Swiss during World War II, laundering Nazi gold and all this kind of thing. Whenever there's chaos in a situation, there's a huge amount of money to be there for people because the wheels are all in spin. Do you know what I mean? It's like totally. A big roulette wheel. So yeah, this situation absolutely has. And like
if we've had a massive transfer of wealth, by default you've had a massive transfer of power because wealth is power, you know. And so that for me is dangerous sort of stuff. And another thing I read last night is that I've said before that the high street economies are gone. The giants of the high street, and there's a massive list of them. Go and find it. It's really easy to find. The giants of high street have all filed for bankruptcy. Now, bankruptcy doesn't mean they have no money. Whatever the legislative loopholes of it are,
those motherfuckers. There's not liable anymore.
So basically, what happens is they can defer everyone who worked for them, all their 401ks in this sort of stuff. That's out the door. Yeah. That's all gone. And if anyone's looking at their nest egg, this is what it said in this Forbes article. Anyone's looking at their nest egg or any sort of insurance thing, forget about it. You want to figure out how to get on the other side of the fence today because there is great opportunity as well. Blood on the streets, buy property. There's great opportunity to make money as well, but then at what cost, morally or socially, etc., etc. So I thought that was interesting. I wanted to have a discussion or talk to you about who benefits from this situation at home. And this is where I thought it got really interesting. This is what had me up to 2:30 in the morning, yo. So just like, I just started thinking about it. It's just like, going, and before we got into politicians, like, going, well, I was like, because one person who I never heard of before in my whole entire life 12 months ago, and now seems to be in my feed every single day, is a Dr. Luke O'Neill. He's a regular fucking rock star these days, old Luke O'Neill. And one of the first things that I thought looked a bit dodgy or whatever is just...
My parents love him.
Do they?
Can't get enough of him.
They can't get enough of him. And fair enough, my mum loves him as well. And I'm just going, this guy... And he's even going... He has his own band and all, and he promotes it. And, if it hadn't been for lockdown, I wouldn't have got my band back together or something like that. I saw this thing and I just wanted to box him. Because I also saw Luke O'Neill on the Late Late Show, giddy as a child, talking about... And I'm not getting into a vaccine conversation. I think we should actually have a vaccine podcast at some point down the line. But he was talking about, and this is what, and again, I'm not arguing about vaccines. I'm just saying what the man said and why I thought it was dodgy. He said, we're talking about a vaccine that has proven to, and we won't even get into how long it takes or any of that stuff. But he was saying that there was 65% efficacy of this vaccine, and that... And he was giddy. And in the same sentence, he said, by the way, we've no data on this. This is just a press release. And the words the man said. On Friday, there's actually no data. They'll be doing a press release. So I'm saying you're promoting... Because here's another thing that I read, is that if you have a vaccine with 65% efficacy, 100% of the population, even if 100% of the population took it, you would not achieve herd immunity, because you need over 70%. You need a vaccine with 100% efficacy and 70% of the people to take it for it to work as a vaccine.
Right, yeah.
If 100% of the people took a 65% efficacy vaccine, you wouldn't reach herd immunity.
Yeah.
So and anyway, that's something we can get into further, but he's promoting this thing, but under the basis that he actually has no data for it. And for me, if you're a doctor, you can't be telling people something's great when you don't have any data for it. I'm sorry. That's my opinion only. Fair enough. And so that's why I started going, Luke O'Neill. And I just started a little search. And this is not obscure stuff. It fucking turns out that Luke O'Neill has created some products, pharmaceutical products. Well, actually, first of all, papers and research he has done has been sponsored by GlaxoSmithKline. Go and Google GlaxoSmithKline if you want to find out who they are. In my opinion, not to be trusted. In my opinion, Luke O'Neill promoting a vaccine that they have no data on when he is in the past being sponsored for research by GlaxoSmithKline. That's what I call, in my opinion, a conflict of motherfucking interest. Okay? He also has something to do with a drug called Citrix. And he also has a link to Pfizer somehow, Dave. And so I'm going, here's some conflict of interest shit. But he has a drug involving a drug called Citrix, which is owned by Eli Lilly. Now, Eli Lilly knew that Prozac made people 14% more depressed and suicidal than not taking it. That's a fact, apparently. And Eli Lilly knew that. The control group showed that therapy and whatever worked better. They fucking knew that. And they sold the product anyway.
Now, is that long term or in the? Because I know they say a lot of antidepressants cause you get you more depressed initially.
Guess what, Len? Or sorry, not guess what, because that sounds a bit. Guess what, Len? Sorry, what I meant to say is.
Whoop-arms!
I don't actually know. Truth be told, Len, I don't know.
But nevertheless, yeah.
And it just paints the picture. It's just like going. He's just starting to look a little bit less like he's on a pedestal.
I'll tell you this. There is in my realm of experience, there is not a single pharmaceutical company out there that is, has clean hands, let alone has clean hands, but is even morally upstanding in any way whatsoever. They're all dirty, right?
Yes.
And yet they produce, we use their product all the time because they produce very useful products, right? But like any multi-billion-dollar industry...
I don't use very many pharmaceutical products. I I'm wary of them.
Yeah, but I mean, if you've
And,
ever
like,
taken
don't get-
antibiotics or anything,
Yeah, but
like
here's
that.
another thing is like that the same yeah, okay, yeah.
Or
I
if
understand.
you became very sick,
If I became very
you would
sick.
wake up in a hospital and found you'd used 5 pharmaceutical
Okay,
products.
yeah, but here's
without even
another
having
thing is that, like, I don't
realised
want to
it.
bank on the pharmaceutical products. Maybe that's what I mean more. Like, I'm 36 years of age. I'm terrified of cancer. I'm terrified of diabetes. I'm terrified of cholesterol and blood pressure and having heart disease. Like, I'm fucking terrified of that shit. And I'm not banking on a medication. I'm banking on put practices and protocols, personal shit in place today to improve your health, to lower your odds of ending up in that situation. We're all going to end up in that situation, granted. I just don't want to end up in it when I'm 50.
That's a good, yeah, that's a really
People are
good
going to
way
live till
be.
they're 100
That's a really good
in
way
the
to be.
future, 120. Like, that's where the medical world is bringing us. But they're going to live in pain for 50 of those years.
Yeah.
Discomfort for 50 of those years.
Yeah.
And, like, don't get me wrong, modern medicine has... It looks like it saved my mum's life. It looks like she could have died 2 years ago if she hadn't have received this, the trial she's on. And so I'm not saying by default, but even at that, I'm wary of them cunts.
But I mean, don't they say them MRI machines were developed while they were designing equipment for, was it the space program, which was headed by NASA scientists who were originally part of the Nazi administration.
So Werner von Braun, who
there's-
invented the V2 rocket, was taken via Operation Paperclip to the States as a good Nazi, and 100% was the head of rockets for NASA. Look into Operation Paperclip, your mind will be blown.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
But I mean,
so isn't that so? There's kind of a
Yeah,
thing
no,
for
I know that
detecting
you're saying,
cancer.
yeah, I
That's
know,
as
but at the
result
same
of-
time, like, do you want to? Are you not going to get an MRI every day because the fucking thing will give you cancer?
Yeah, that's true too.
You know
yeah,
what I
but when
mean?
you need it, you know
When you
it's there,
need
I
it, you
guess.
need it.
I guess I'm saying, so it's just about the group think thing again, right? So it's for me, I go on, do you know what? I go on people, okay?
Yeah.
I look at people. And maybe it's a stupid thing, but I look at people and I try to use my natural, whatever, my instincts to kind of to assess their character, right? So when I look at the people who are saying one thing versus the people who are saying another thing, that's how I judge it.
But that's my
Do you know
point.
that
It's
kind
like,
of way?
but that's exactly my point, and that's why I'm trying to say, why don't you look at the? Or I'm not. I'm saying I'm looking at the people who are promoting this narrative, and I'm sort of going, well, if it was aside from this, if you just told me that stuff, I just wouldn't trust that person.
Right, okay.
Do you know what I mean? And like, again, like, look at this, seems like a real sound guy, he plays guitar, and he contradicts himself often. There's an article on News Talk where he says the only way to get 100% efficacy from the coronavirus is to catch the coronavirus, and your body will create the relevant T cells for up to 17 years to then kick the antibodies back into... Like, there's a lot of opposing... and I just, when I read that, I was like, I'm sure that's almost what people say our bodies have been doing for ages and now. Because, like, here's another thing, is like, where did this word, and I think this is, like,
you were saying about
asymptomatic.
this. Yeah.
And, like, a woman makes a point in one of those that I'm talking to, I was like, we used to call asymptomatic immune.
Yeah.
And that sort of stuff, and it's like when Luke O'Neill and Tony Holohan, and we're going to talk about him right now, start throwing these words at me, they already make me nervous, those sort of words, like coronavirus not detected rather than negative in your test.
Yeah.
It's just too ambiguous, like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when they start throwing that words, and then you look at what potentially their agendas could be, I'm like, you're just starting to smack a little bit for me.
Yeah, I get you.
And maybe I'm a crazy, cynical, fucking tinfoil hat wearing lunatic. I don't
No,
know.
man. See, that's it. Doesn't have to be one or the other. Do you know that kind of way? Like, the fact of the matter is, we don't personally know. I haven't. We're not sitting here going, well, Ruben, that's funny. You say you've done tests in your fucking petri dish in your lab, because the tests in my lab, we don't have a fucking lab. We're only arguing over, if we're even arguing, or we're only debating or discussing the different people we've listened to, the different sources of information, which is ultimately unknowable. Whether, I mean, if someone's like, yeah, but that's just that person's paid by Vladimir Putin, I go, well, I mean, I technically don't know that for a fact that you're wrong. I can't say. There just comes a point where you have to believe something or trust somebody.
Trust something, and that's because I say it all the time.
Believe is the wrong word, sorry, because believe means to hold it close to your heart. So trust, I would say, or just rely on or listen to. Yeah,
Respect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, as I say all the times, like, you know nothing. You only know what you know. You only know your own truths and perspectives. The rest is, you know, you don't know.
If I only relied on what I knew, what I had seen with my own hands.
Be very sparse living. Where it's like,
Yeah.
what? Sorry, what? Yeah.
I'd be eating leaves out of trees. I was about to say I wouldn't. I'd be like, I don't think the coronavirus is real because I haven't seen it. But I do. I have relatives who've caught it now. Thank fuck nobody I know has died from it. But I do have my aunt, my uncle, my two cousins got it.
Yeah.
But but then it's like, well, are they lying or?
I know,
they
but
just
that's
get the
touch on
flu?
something. Maybe we'll get.
Sorry,
yeah,
I'm probably all over the place
not at
here.
all. You're making a valid point. I wasn't trying to interrupt there. I was just sort of going. I was gonna. Yeah, I agree with you. But here's another thing. It's like. Oh no, sorry.
On the Luke O'Neill thing, I think it's perfect. I remember watching an interview we did. I think with that the Irish Times had that winter festival thing or whatever. Anyway, where he talked about the money he'd made. And it sounded like, well, it made millions. He obviously wouldn't say how much he'd made himself or whatever, but he wasn't shying away from the fact that he'd done good business out of this. But in a way, you could argue that makes it more like his career is sort of on the line. And with all this fucking advice he's giving out,
but you see, that's my problem.
Is he not opening himself up to getting sued if something happens here? Like the AstraZeneca, like you say, we'll talk about the vaccine another time maybe. But, that's just come out during the week. The AstraZeneca vaccine has been recalled.
But you know what AstraZeneca have now done? No. And this is a fact now. AstraZeneca, who are obliged, they've been paid for 300 million doses by Europe, are now turned around to Europe and say, we'll give you 100 million.
Yeah.
Yep. There's about to be a serious issue there. And that is, and I don't give a fuck, man, that is malevolent power play there because they're going, oh, you want to recall our product? And now you want it again? Well, now you can't have it. We'll give you 1/3 of it. And it's like, don't fuck with us or we'll cut that supply off.
It's no
look at
surprise.
These companies. Yeah. It's no fucking surprise going, look at those companies. Anyway.
And the only other thing I was going to say is that you talk about him contradicting himself, whatever. And maybe I don't want to just sound like I'm trying to let everybody off the hook. But also,
Well, I want to hang everyone, so maybe it's good if you want to let everyone off the hook.
You keep tying the nooses around, and
no, he's all right.
He's sorry. I'm tying the other end or whatever.
He
just fell.
Gallows happy.
Yeah, but people, especially in the early days of this, people didn't know, man. No one has ever dealt with this situation
and that's fine.
Before.
I'm not, and like Martin Feely says, we didn't know when these projections came out. We thought we were looking at whatever the equivalent of 100 million people in society 100 years ago was, and that's why I think it's something like 30 odd million in Western Europe alone. They were talking.
Yeah.
But
Luke O'Neill, I think for a lot of people, he's been like the reassuring captain's
I
voice.
know, but that's my fucking problem. It's just like, he plays guitar and he's sort of cool and he doesn't even look like a doctor. He wears his shirts up and I was like, this guy is in cahoots, total league with the biggest pharmaceutical companies on the planet who do things like what I've already discussed. And I'm not saying therefore by default, but like have a look at the big picture. Does he have, and this is the only point I'm trying to make, does he have a vested, like his career is on the line potentially, you just said.
Yeah, absolutely.
When guys have their career on the line, they do shitty things to people.
Right.
That's in my opinion. It's career, money, effectively, that drives some of the most malevolent policies across the world, in my opinion.
He's very much made himself the face of
I distrust that automatically, especially when he's giddy talking about, no data and 65. I'm just like, come back when you have a bit of data there, mate. Doctor. Tony Hewlin. I was pulling on this thread in my own brain that as someone at the centre of the pap smear scandal, potentially Tony Hewlin, and I know this might sound bit shitty thing to say as well, but he also, in the midst of this, his own wife was in palliative care for cancer, and part of me thought, like, and I'm empathising, could I put myself in those shoes and sort of go, well, maybe if I'd been at the centre of this scandal, which had such detrimental effects on women in the country, and my own wife is now going, now she's not got cervical cancer to my knowledge, but she's in palliative care for some cancer, I believe.
She's dead, man.
She's dead, sorry. So at the time she had been, and again, I'm not, but part of me is like, when I stepped inside, if I stepped inside those shoes, if I empathise with his situation, could I be almost thinking that I'm gonna fucking sort of, there's gonna be a bit of redemption out of this, and for the pap smear thing, but also because like he wants to save the day potentially. And I'm not saying from a necessarily malevolent place. Maybe it's from an altruistic thing, like. But I think that potentially, and this is what I was thinking, that potentially his opinion, his execution of policy, whatever, could be coloured slightly by that. He's only a human being. Would make sense, potentially.
Yeah, yeah.
So looking into it, and like actually, I didn't know enough about the cervical check scandal, and it's a fucking disgrace. Tony Houlihan's a fucking disgrace. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Tony Houlihan knew. He knew that women had cancer after they had negative results from their pap smears and didn't inform them. They knew they had cancer after the fact. They knew that the test result was wrong. And they changed the diagnosis to having cancer and didn't inform the women because didn't want to escalate the situation to a ministerial level. That fucking happened. And so I'm going from my potential place of altruism to, you're a fucking asshole, mate. Sorry, I'm calling you out on that one. And the other thing is, he wrote a letter to Simon Harris, because Simon Harris was the Minister for Health when this came out in 2018. He wrote a letter to Simon Harris proposing that he stage a quick internal review done by himself, Tony Houlihan, to get it out of the way quickly. And he actually said that no evidence at this stage, there is no evidence at this stage that there are quality or patient safety concerns with cervical check. That's what he wanted to promote. That's what he wanted the findings to find. 2 months later, it was confirmed 18 of the 206 women affected by the cervical check program had died.
Jesus.
2 months previous to that knowledge, he was trying to implement a quick and internal review done by himself. In fairness to Simon Harris wouldn't allow that and had an external review, and that's where they came up with the 18 of 206 women affected by cervical cancer program had died. I'm sorry, but now I just am out with Tony Houlihan. And funnily enough, the tribunal, chaired by 3 judges, there's a tribunal meant to be taking place that it's chaired by 3 judges, 2 of which are men, one of whom is a pro-lifer, and the judge who ruled the evidence used to secure Graham Dwyer's conviction was contrary to EU law. So these are the 3 judges on the tribunal. Again, it's not necessarily, but I'm like, I don't think I'm in league with that person. That tribunal has been postponed to sometime after July 2020 because of coronavirus.
Because he got called. So he might still have to answer to that then. Yeah, well, that's, in fairness, that's kind of fair enough, isn't it? Jeez, imagine having that hanging over
Like,
your
he
head.
is going back a long time, like, because I'm going to...
When was that? But that was only a few years
That
ago.
was in 2018. What I said there, the cervical check thing was from 2014, I think. It was the year of 2014 and 15 where they botched the test results. So he made the decision not to escalate it to a ministerial level then, and he tried to convince Simon Harris on a quick internal thing. And like that just made me sick. No evidence at this stage that there are quality or patient safety concerns with cervical check. And 2 months later, 18 of the 206. More women have died at this stage. That was in 2018. They said, as of 2018, 18 of the 206 women affected by cervical check program have died. More women have died since then. It's just worth pointing out.
They've all been informed now, of course.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So look, again, I'm just saying because when he wanted to write that letter, he had only one issue, he had only one concern.
And that was himself.
It's his career.
Yeah.
That stinks, man. And I'm
well,
sorry,
it
it's just
does,
like,
I mean-
I'm not sorry, and again, really important, I'm not there for poo-pooing everything Tony Houlihan says about coronavirus, lockdowns, whatever, but I am sort of going, this to me is painting the picture of a person who doesn't have the best interest, who would prioritise his career over the best interests of ordinary
on
people.
the other hand, it sounds like if that tribunal was to reconvene, if they, it sounds like that'll be the end for him. So, in a way, I guess he's probably not thinking about his career to an extent anymore, unless he thinks if he handles this situation really well, that might kind of count in his favor.
That's what I just said. Redemption.
Yeah. Redemption, yeah. But then would that not?
But also it's just like
would
going.
That not encourage him?
Because another thing is just like, it's. Barry, can I ring you back in a little bit? But the one thing is, I won't be taking any ice cream this week because I have it up to me nines. I'm pretty sure, Baz, I said that to you last week now, Barry. I said I'm going to be up to my bollocks with it.
I'm up to me bollocks in ice cream.
I'll bring you back in a little bit, Barry. And sorry there if I let you down, but I'll bring you back shortly and discuss it with you, alright? Thanks, mate. Okay. So.
Yeah, man, it's like I don't know too much about the guy other than, like I was. He's not the head of NAFIT, is he? Or he's the
chairperson for
chairperson or whatever. Yeah. I mean,
and now he stepped down temporarily, but he's.
Yeah, because it was his wife's kind of final. And look, and that'll buy him a lot of sympathy from me to an extent as well.
And that's fair enough. And again, I'm not.
But whenever I hear his name on the radio, I fucking walk away and that's not any badness to him. It's like Dr. Tony Houlihan has said, and I just go something fucking depressing, and I just walk away because I know it's just going to be bad news. Do you know what I mean? It's just going to be because look, I'm not trying to paint him like he's some kind of.
I've got another
Nancy,
thing about him, and I
Dr.
think
Death,
we'll go towards the end of it.
But yeah, he's I think he sums up our. Is that, and look, and they'll throw this out there as well. Is there an element of our response to lockdown where we sort of enjoy being sent to our room and kind of reveling in? Is it like a kind of Catholic guilt thing that we sort of think?
I think it was actually a human thing.
Or that like, oh, of course the pubs have to be closed. Of course we shouldn't be having any fun. This is a time for solemnity.
Yeah, maybe I know what you'd say.
This is like a big Lent. Basically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. And there was an element of that when we left the other day, like that pang of guilt and guilt, basically.
Yeah.
And no one loves guilt and shame more than the Irish. Yes. We thrive on that stuff.
Oh.
But another thing is, I remember ages ago, Elon Musk, and think what you will about Elon Musk, but he just said a thing that was definitely interesting. It was like, we wanted it though, didn't we? Like he said, human beings want it. And I sort of was like going... When he said it, there was a part of me who was like going, yeah, it was like we're... How do I feel?
We wanted the virus now, is that what he said?
Yeah, it was like we almost wanted that level of panic.
Yeah.
We almost wanted... Like, you ever get into a situation where you're depressed in your job?
Yeah.
And something mental happens and you fucking go with it and go mental. And next thing you've thrown your uniform up in the air and walked out the front door.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That's sort of the same. Anyway, just because you were saying, is there something in it that we want a bit? And... That was just.
Is it kind of the unbearable likeness of being Le Pelle de Vie, the fucking kind of
Oh, laddie da, Mr. Frenchman.
Laddie da, Mr. Frenchman, cup of tea. But that we want to kind of, like you say, flip the table over, or just for some sort of excitement.
So it's some sort of reason. That my job, like how many people just go, oh, I wish there was a fucking pandemic, I wouldn't have got my job or something, you know what I mean?
Right, okay,
I wish the building I worked in exploded, I wish there was another 9/11 in my workplace, or something, you know what I mean? There's an element of that.
There's that meme, have you ever seen the car pulling up to like a dealership or something and there's blazing fire coming through the window and the caption is just what you pray to see every morning when you arrive for work.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's it. That's exactly it. There's an element of that to it.
Yeah.
It's like, fucking right on. When this started 2 weeks ago, I was like, fucking 2 week holiday, boys. Year later, we're still here. I lost my job. It's crap.
Yeah, man, it's like then there was a sci-fi element to it as well. There was a kind of a, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're staying in. I remember one day.
It's like a movie.
Going through the radio, I came down in the morning, clicked the radio, and I was like, Gardaí have something restrictions for click. NAFIT have issued something, click. And word from the Taoiseach about new click. and medical staff and whatever. And I was like, fucking just wanted to throw the radio across. I was like, this is like, it's like I'm in Shaun of the Dead or some shit.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
you're in the intro of the sci-fi movie. They're definitely trying to get all the, or desperately trying to get all the exposition out. And every radio station, every TV
Millions of
channel.
people have they're staring upon
This new zombie virus that seems to be, people are warned not to wear yellow. Yeah, like all of that fucking shit. Yeah, so look, there's that. The world has been completely turned around, and you know, yeah, there's that kind of element to it as well. Like, where did that, do we kind of, and also, is there an element of, we sort of want the worst possible thing that could happen to happen. Do you know what I mean? Because then, once it's happened,
it's done.
As soon as you see, the sun is dying, the meteor is coming.
Up.
Oh, well, that's grand. Don't have to worry about anything anymore because the worst fucking thing has sort of happened.
Doesn't matter if that person doesn't like me or I'm not going to be successful at this thing I'm trying.
Because you were saying earlier, man, about anxiety, and I know we said this the other day, but
I feel like I've no goals left.
But anxiety, in a way, man, is more natural than people think. Do you know what I mean? It's more natural. Like, we're descended from the monkeys who went down to the water hole and they were like cupping water and looking around going, shit, was that a fucking predator? Is that a fucking predator over there? Does that tree look like a predator? And there were other monkeys going, fucking relax, dude. What's their problem? It's a good day. And then they got eaten by a fucking tiger. Yeah. So we're descended from the monkeys who survived because they were fucking cagey motherfuckers.
But they were cagey, but they had their sort of fight or flight thing initiated part way already. But is that the same as anxiety as, like, you know, like that? It's just like, why would I bother trying to write a song if we can never play a gig again?
Yeah.
That sort of stuff where, you know, where's my son? What's going to happen to my son's life?
Dude, it's like we're at a funeral. It's like we've all been at a funeral for a year and we've wanted to go home for pretty much the entire time. But now it's really getting... But you know where you're at that stage of... Or you're at a party, you're out with friends, and you're at that stage of tired where you actually don't feel like you can leave anymore because you don't have the energy to make an exit.
Yeah,
you know
exactly. I know exactly.
You don't have the energy to go, you're too right, but sure, isn't that always the way? Shit, man. Anyway, listen, I'll let you go. I have to be off. You're actually just kind of bobbing on the wave of hopefully this thing will break up so I can just grab my coat and leave. Yeah, exactly. So I feel like we're at that stage, and I feel like, honestly...
I think it's like... Sorry, you feel like, honestly...
If tomorrow, if they were to snap their fingers and go, oh, it turns out it's magically disappeared, like War of the Worlds or
that'd
something.
That'd be great, wouldn't it?
Gone. But I don't... it would be amazing.
Fucking in the streets, man.
Yeah. Fucking in the bushes.
Fucking brilliant. It's like, you know, when when they end Prohibition in The Simpsons.
Oh, yeah.
It's like 2 minutes later, everyone's just like...
Yeah.
Bart's drunk or whatever.
Yeah. Or like Bill Hicks used to say, I can't wait till they get a cure for AIDS, man. They'll be fucking in the streets. Yeah, that's true. But as well, I know I feel like I've lost so many of I don't even know if I had social skills before, but I just feel like I'm a different person. I feel like I'd get straight back into it, no problem.
Yeah, really. No bother. I just wanted to happen. But look, let's continue to look at people here who might be benefiting from the certain situation or the current situation. One person who I got, let's get into the politicians of it, because Leo Varadkar, obviously I'm not a fan of Leo Varadkar. I've expressed multiple times my problems with the man.
Yeah.
Last week I said, here's a little food for thought, that this guy is promoting himself as just a normal person like the rest of us. But a couple of things I read during the week, or like just to sort of smear that idea maybe a little bit, is that, like, we know that Leo Varadkar is a career politician. So for me, anything he says, anything that comes out of his mouth, I just automatically think is bullshit and means to an end for his agenda, which is his own political career, his own political capital. Couple of things, just because, just like the rest of us, and I said last week, who's the us in that statement? I'll tell you who the us isn't. The us isn't 8 households that are being evicted from their homes now as we speak in Dunleary, some of whom have lived there for upwards of 20 years. The process that the Vulture Fund, and you can say what it is, that the process that the International Vulture Fund have gone through in order to get where they're getting is malevolent. 4 days, I think, so a number of years ago, 3-4 years ago, 4 days before a certain piece of legislation was to be initiated, a rent cap legislation, which they do in countries all over Europe. You're not forced to buy a house anywhere else in fucking Europe because they have rent caps. Because these are people's homes, you know.
Yeah.
And so after they were told, even though they got in between before the 4-day war, before the watershed of this new legislation, that they would not be allowed to increase the rent by 50%. 50%. They said, right, fair enough. They came back and said, well, what we're going to do is evict every motherfucker in the complex. And there is a body for tenancy rights. I think it's the RTB, or the TRB, the Tenancy Rights Board.
No, you're right. The
RTB.
Rental tenants board.
Okay, so it was the RTB. And there is a body there in place, but they're realistically powerless to do anything about the legislative loopholes that these cocksuckers take advantage of, and that are created by the likes of Leo Varadkar.
Yeah, man, like at the rental situation, I mean, you're absolutely right now, you bring
But just, sorry, let me just wrap this up. They said, we'll evict everyone under these circumstances. The Rents Tenancy Board Rental Tenancy Board turned around and said, no, you can't do that because you can't evict 10 people from one complex under those grounds. So what they did is they come back and say, we're going to evict 8 of them. And that was granted. And even though one of the tenants seems to have a bit of gumption about him, he's parlaying with his local representatives, he's making the argument, and it's an obvious fucking argument, that you've just allowed these people to use a malevolent backdoor to achieve the same gain. So your legislation isn't worth shit, because they just fucking walk around it. And Leo Varadkar knows this. Leo Varadkar is eating a steak dinner box, accompanied with a nice red wine, posting pictures of it to social media. That's what he's doing. And he's not talking about this situation. And because now the leader of the opposition of Ireland is Mary MacDonald. Or what's her name? Mary Lou MacDonald, right? And what that means, that's never happened before. Because always the leader of the opposition of Ireland, or whatever the term is, I'm going to find it, has always been a member of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil. Yeah. Now, say what you like.
Almost always the leader of Fine Gael. Do you know that, man? Do you know that we are the second most, Fianna Fáil are the second most prolific political party in a nominal democracy, in quotes, in the 20th century. In fact, in history. Since most democracy. Do you know what the number one is?
Break that down just a little bit for me.
So, in other words, Fianna Fáil have been in power for more time than any other single political party in any other nominal democracy that's ever existed, right? Except one, which is Liberia, where the true Whigs. Now, I don't know if you know much about Liberia, but suffice to say, it's not exactly what you'd call a functioning democracy, and we're just a little behind. We're just a little.
I would like to add that. Oh no, forget about it. But again, you trace colonialism back to the Brits and you'll find out why it's not a functioning democracy.
Yeah.
And it's little to do with Liberians. But anyway, well, maybe now it does, but it started back then.
Well, it's actually more to do with the Back to Africa movement began by this guy. But anyway, it's
okay.
That's a whole. It's a whole, really interesting story.
Well, maybe we could have a look at that in the future.
Freed slaves from got together and they bought it up, and that's why the capital's called Monrovia, because George Monroe was the president at the time. This is like in the early 1800s, and they fucking treated the native Liberians like fucking shit, man. It was really, really bad.
That's my point. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Crazy.
Right,
but
okay.
Anyway, that's for another time.
But then, sorry, because I just wanted to find that bit. So what I'm saying basically is that, and we know Leo Varadkar is a career politician who cares only about his career and his political capital. And maybe a point in case of that is when the nurses were getting ready in their tens of thousands to go on strike, and they were trying to communicate the reasons for that strike. They offered Leo Varadkar, who I believe was Minister for Health at the time and is a doctor, an opportunity to come down and do an 8-hour shift with the nurses and see firsthand what it is they have to go through and experience, and to try and get a better picture, empathise with their situation. And he told them in no uncertain terms to go fuck themselves. No. And what's the first thing Leo Varadkar does in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic? One of the first things he does is signs himself up as, because of his medical background, on the phones, doing whatever, volunteering. And if you can't see that is, and this is just, in fact, that's a too aggressive way to go at it. In my opinion, it is really obvious to me that is completely about political capital, because when you were invited down to see what the story was because you were in charge of policy and maybe could do something about it, you didn't want to know anything about it. But when it was advantageous for you in the public eye to do your bit for the greater good, you jumped on it like a fucking hot snob.
Man, in a way, I don't know if there's anyone.
I'm really cynical about that.
But dude, I don't think there's anyone out there who I've never met someone who thinks, oh, Leo, oh, lovely Leo. No, his heart's in the right place. Blah blah blah. As far as I know, the impression everyone has of him is as a total career-driven, highly ambitious. You could almost say megalomaniac. But in a way, like the famous, to quote fucking, what's his name, Henry Kissinger, or paraphrase Henry Kissinger, but he's our ambitious, self-driven, whatever, megalomaniac.
But he's not mine.
Yeah.
He's not yours. He's not Rob's.
You,
he's not any of the people we met in Dublin's.
No.
He's not their megalomaniac.
No.
He's just a megalomaniac who's in control of policy, and that, for me, has to change. That's my whole point.
He's at the centre. He's in the
And like,
the
again,
centre of
I don't
power,
want, if I can identify ways in which the lockdown is having negative effects on the people, the lowest, the members of society, on the lowest rungs of society, and not the likes of him and his mates, that's my whole fucking point. Yeah. I don't want that megalomaniacal piece of shit dictating policy to me when he doesn't live in my world, never has, never will.
Dude, your man, and not to just, I know I shouted on about it, but your man Harari has a really interesting point about how power, when you're at the centre of power, right? And that, you know, your view is so completely distorted because once you're in power, all you're concerned about is the status quo, and all anyone around you is concerned about. You basically can never hear the truth when you're in power because it's refracted so many different ways. Because nobody wants to tell the truth to you, because all they care about is getting a little bit closer to power. Do you know what I mean? So in order to hear or see or experience the truth, you have to journey. You have to wander, and you have to journey to the outside, to the fringes of the fucking circle, right?
Okay, yeah.
But the thing there is, he says, you'll encounter the truth, you'll encounter, you know, as he calls it, revolutionary ideas, but you'll also have to sift through just a lot of crazy fucking shit.
And that's sort of, that seemed a little bit evident maybe the other day as well.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I heard a thing before, it says the only way for a revolution to truly work is to kill the person who initiated the revolution, has to die at the end of it.
Wow, that's
That's
what
a real
happens,
revolution,
though, isn't it?
It's just like, all right, I've done my bit. Boom. Now you better fucking, you know.
That's really good, or else it just becomes a cult of personality. Like, think of Michael Collins,
Lord of the Rings,
died in in the Civil War or whatever.
Yeah.
He, not that he began, but he was definitely the kind of igniting force, the figurehead, an almost messianic figure for those who don't know. That carried us through the War of Independence, and then died at the very end. And almost leaves this kind of feeling of, oh, what might things have been like if he'd lived.
Okay, yeah.
But there's bad versions of it as well, where like Robespierre, your man, who was, I don't know again if he initiated, but became the leader of the French Revolution, and then started the Red Terror, where people were just being hauled in front of the guillotine. Because someone had said.
Because man, we just like, and
then he got killed himself.
Okay, right. So look, obviously, this time last year, or a bit, 12 months ago, say, or whatever it was, just over a year ago, Leo Varadkar, as the head of Fine Gael, suffered the most crushing defeat that Fine Gael have ever encountered. And that's not, I mean, that's true. Like, I mean, they'd never before had Sinn Féin. done so well, and Leo Varadkar was the head of the acting government when that happened. And if you're trying, I think that given the type of person, talking about the type of person and what his ideals are, that he is, that for me is just like one of his probably the most prevalent thought processes in his head. It's like he's probably, that's hurting him and he wants to change that. And I wouldn't be surprised, because I think there are individual power grabs going on all over the world. And I'm not, because I don't think, I've said this before, I look at Leo Varadkar, Mio Martin, Stephen Donnelly and Simon Harris, and I don't see the Illuminati. I don't think they're in on some global conspiracy with the Rockefellers and the Rothschild. That's when that narrative or that theory goes out the door for me. But they are what they are. They are individualist career politicians who identify ways to survive. They identify survival patterns. Like, and I just feel then that the idea for forming a coalition with their fucking arch enemies and the Green Party was bolstered by the coronavirus. The coronavirus created a situation where no one really asked the relevant questions. Like these cunts, this time last year, or at the January 2020, there were over 10,000 people living in temporary accommodation, whole families and everything. That was one of the most major social issues and the health service in this country. And that's just disappeared.
Yeah,
And
who
presided over the growth of people living in temporary accommodation? Fine Gael, since 2011. Fine Gael. You know, and so again, it's just like, I think that I think the lockdown and the political capital gain from it is advantageous to Leo Varadkar, and therefore I don't trust it or him.
Yeah.
That's the crux of what I'm saying, I suppose. And like, again, Micheál Martin. Like, because here's another thing, I didn't realise this, that Leo Varadkar and Micheál Martin are swapping positions in 2022.
Yeah.
Leo Varadkar, I didn't realise this, will become...
That's part of the deal, yeah.
That's part of the deal. And like, even that part of it for me is just like, could you make it more obvious, lads?
Dude, it's so crazy to think that, because I had my mate over in England who was saying to me, what the fuck happened with that election? And it was as if, because the whole time in the run up, they've been like, oh no, we're never getting in a coalition. No, it's vote for one or the other of us. We're never doing a coalition. And then the country votes for Sinn Féin, and they go, oh well, if you're gonna vote for Sinn Féin, oh well, then okay, then we'll do.
Then we're getting in bed together.
We didn't realise you were that serious.
And when you look at what count they got, the counts that they got in on, you look at the count. I mean, I'd love to pull them up. Micheál Martin, what count did he get in on? Stephen Donnelly, what count did he get in on? These were not people's first choice.
No.
You know, and they took advantage of a situation to advance their career and expand their political capital. And I feel that they're, you know, that some, like, you know, we know this when people are panicked in wartime and stuff like this, they do whatever they're fucking told.
Yeah.
And they go for what they know. They go back for that safety. Do you know what I mean?
I have to say, man, on Patrick's Day, when Varadkar came out and stood at the podium and delivered his speech, which was mostly written by Peter Jackson, I think. But he delivered his speech. I remember sitting and watching it, and it was in this moment of, we'd just been told, like literally the Friday before, that the country was going into lockdown, which was something we'd never fucking heard about. You know, that the case of this virus has been building up and up. There was a lot of fear. And when I saw him stand out there, you know, a fucking qualified doctor or whatever, I felt like, that's my Taoiseach. That guy is the guy I want, who's you know, whose administration have been running things already.
How come so many Irish politicians say because when I hear that, I'm just like, get the fuck out of here, mate. You know, go write a speech, articulate yourself.
I'll tell you this, man. I fucking rather look at him than the other fucking fella, Yellow Pack Nosferatu. This fucking guy, Micheál Martin, who we have in.
Like, I'll tell you a bit about Micheál Martin, and again, it's just to try and paint a picture of I wouldn't trust these fucking pieces of shit as far as I could throw them. Micheál Martin, like I said, they're swapping in 2022. Like I mentioned there, the crushing defeat as head of Fine Gael that Leo Varadkar would have suffered, the likes of which has like never been seen before. Or, you know, the political landscape changed in a way that we never would have seen before in the history of the state, and he's at the top of that when it happens. And it's obviously the biggest faux pas for Fine Gaelers and Fianna Fáilers that they get their ass handed to them by Sinn Féin.
Oh, the
Like
craziest thing imaginable.
Sacrilege. It's the craziest thing imaginable. And they're like Micheál Martin, when like it's just like going, this guy is the most career politician we have in this country. He has been doing it for over 30 years. And so number one, there's that, like the career politician thing I'm not into. But he was the first ever head of Fianna Fáil, the head of the party, not to be Taoiseach.
Yeah.
And for a careerist piece of shit like that, part of me just thinks then that he starts to go, like they just set it up. Well, Micheál will get us going now, and then sure you can relinquish that because you'll be tarnished and you get it back in a couple of years, and it's just jobs for the boys. Yeah. And I just feel that they're bolstering it with this fear, this public safety thing. Yeah. And if you don't have a lockdown, if we don't have the public safety fear issues, then we go back to looking at what bungling fucking idiots they are. Then we go back to look at the inadequacy in the health service. Then we go back to looking at the housing crisis we're having in a country of 5 million people, very small demographics, and an economy of a GDP of 300 billion. The social issues I'm talking about are the results of an ineptitude in political expertise. These people shouldn't have been doing the job. Their tenure has led to the decimation of these infrastructures, and yet we're not focusing.
We were only discussing earlier or previously as well, like you say, the homelessness crisis, the rental housing crisis, not to mention fucking direct provision, which is almost like having a concentration camp for asylum seekers in this country, and they all have
loads of
them.
Concentration camps.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And
that
they all
stuff
contributed to the fucking problem. Where were the
did.
major breakouts of the virus? They were in direct provision centres. They were in fucking like you were saying, amongst, or probably a huge number of deaths related to people like ourselves who have to move back in with our parents to the family home. Because, affordable accommodation isn't fucking out there at the moment, and they've no interest in it being
because they can afford the palatial accommodation they live in.
But let me ask you this, man.
These motherfuckers got a 10% raise this year.
I don't know if this is a side note, but I weirdly in my head think that in their heads, I don't think that they look at themselves in the mirror and go, "You dastardly swine, you so and so." I think they're egomaniacal enough.
Messiah jobby.
Exactly.
And when we get into the other stuff, if we do a vaccine one, I agree with you.
Shit
sorry.
going on there, but I
100%. But at the same time, it's just like that for me doesn't excuse it, because if you were really honest or altruistic, if you were really a defender, what I wanted from a politician, then you would be able to identify that. Yeah. It's just like, how can you tell me it's the same? How can you tell me it's the same? Look, man. A guy said something to us yesterday. He's just like, and the way he said it, and it might be on the thing, it's just like, stand up and question it. Really. And he's like, really, really. And that's what I'm just trying to convey. It's just like, just really stop, take a deep breath, have a look at what's being said to you, and have a look at the people who are saying to you. I'm not necessarily saying it's wrong, but fucking question it. Show some sort of cognitive resistance to the narrative. It's really important, I think, because those motherfuckers would say mass. You know what I mean? They'd say anything to achieve their agenda. That's what I feel. And again,
to stay in power, to stay at the
that's their
center,
agenda the whole time, because they're career
politicians. But I'm glad you agree,
politicians.
because I think that's true, that it's not like you can stay in the centre and be that close to power and know the truth and still decide.
I don't think these are
their views are so distorted.
Bond villains, you know what I mean? But Micheál Martin got elected to Dáil Éireann in the 1989 Charlie Haughey snap election, right? And he was elected to Dáil Éireann. He spent 3 years with old Chaz, And then
Oh,
2 years
Sheva.
later, he's on Bertie Ahern's front bench. Like, they're two of the most corrupt, what's the word I'm looking for? Administrations this country has ever seen. And he's there championing them. Like, that's not a conspiracy, that's a fact. Again, it's just trying to paint a picture of what this person's moral fibre is, what their priorities are, what their agenda is, and am I comfortable with them implementing all of this legislation? No, I'm not. Do I think they are willing to look at or can even see the detrimental effects it has on normal, everyday people? No, I don't. Yeah. And that's it. That's the point you're making. It's like they're in the centre of this non-truth or their truth. But they're not even looking, and it'd be one thing if we were like going, oh, you know, whatever. This is not innocuous, like, you know, rhetoric by fucking bored idiots. These people losing their livelihoods, their jobs, their homes. Yeah. And it can't be belittled and diminished like that. I'm not having it. Yeah. And he supports Brian Cowan. Like, how the fuck did Fianna Fáil get in again straight after Bertie Ahern has to go? Did Brian Cowan get voted in?
I don't remember.
After Bertie's administration
was there
cripples the economy and puts it all on everyone else, did they just get voted straight back in?
Was that like, that was about
2009.
2009, right, yeah.
Anyway, that's just an afterthought. I just thought, again, it's like obvious, here's a guy who's a career politician, and if you, I don't, you know, I just don't see that.
Do we, to a certain extent, it's like the thing we were saying before about the Catholic Church and about, you know, kind of living under the thumb or whatever. Do we kind of like these guys? I mean, Charlie High, even when Charlie High was going into the tribunals, but I'm saying, why are they able to stay in power? Do you know what I mean?
Because I think there's no opposition to them. And Sinn Féin has been the only obvious opposition to them. And up until whatever happened last year, a lot of people wouldn't vote for Sinn Féin because there was, and definitely older generation, like my parents' generation, would be like totally anti-Sinn Féin because
of the whiff of cordite, as they used to say.
Okay, the whiff of cordite, I love that. That's great, then.
In fact, I remember Dad said that, but that's also used within Sinn Féin, that, like, for example, Mary Lou didn't have the whiff of, which would mean, do you know what I mean? They prefer Adams and McGuinness and these guys because, like, they put in work.
Okay, I know what you mean.
So it goes both ways.
It goes both ways, yeah. And, like, I mean, there's definitely old guard in Sinn Féin and the coffers and stuff like that are slightly questionable. But at the same time, I never seen an Irish politician go after someone the way the finance guy for Sinn Féin, it's not Pascal Donahue, it's the other one that has an Irish name.
I know Pascal Sheehy is the only Pascal I can ever think of.
I can't think of it right now, but the finance guy for Sinn Féin, he's the guy who went for the insurance companies with fact, and he went for their fucking jugglers. And when I saw that, I said, I'd never seen an Irish politician do that. Yeah. I never seen an Irish politician look out for the well-being of normal, ordinary people, and be willing to attack and face and call them idiots to their face. Say you're liars. Pierre Stardy, that's who it is. I never seen a guy do that before. Never seen an Irish politician do that, and so I was just like, right, well, this is, I'm on board for that.
Yeah, now look, I mean, they've got careers as well. But
they've got careers as well.
Yeah.
Well, I just think that they have had to do real constituency politics in a contemporary sense for so long that they're not coming from the same. So they're not in the soggy biscuit gang.
No, man, they're selling themselves. You know, they're selling themselves on that basis, and will hopefully be held accountable to that basis. Or certainly, I think so. I mean, who was he said? It was a couple of years ago that the only person, maybe not that election, but the election before, the only party that mentioned mental health in their fucking what do you call it, manifesto was Sinn Féin. Now, it was a fucking sentence or something. It was like, improve mental health services and access to them or whatever. That was it. But no other party mentioned.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
That for me is just a microcosm for the whole problem.
Yeah.
Right there. Yeah. Simon Harris. Here's another person who is going to gain from the situation, whose handling of this pandemic and health crisis is going to bolster his political career. Simon Harris is funny. I read last night he was referred to as the baby of the Dáil, which is actually a play on an Angloism, the baby of Parliament, which is I don't know. It's just like the greenhorn, as it were. But I thought then that
youngest person.
yeah, I thought it was interesting as the baby of the doll, because I don't know. I'm conflicted about Simon Harris potentially. I look at him. I just think he's just a puppet. He doesn't even know, but he's just a chin wiper. You know what I mean? What do you need? What do we need? We need a yes man. Stick Simon in there. He'll just do whatever. If you ask him to suck your cock, if you told him to put his hand in a deep fat fryer, he'd do it. No, like there's a part of me sometimes thinks, I've heard him talk a couple of times and I've gone, geez, he caught me off guard there because he seemed more. I wasn't expecting what he said or whatever. He also did it. He also, as far as I understand, is good at constituency politics. But I feel like he's too eager to please the wrong people. He's too eager to please the political elites. He's being spoon-fed everything as the baby of the doll by Fine Gael, pretty much by Leo Varadkar, actually. Like, sorry, yeah?
Well, I think, man, I mean, if you're part of any political party, and I never have been, but if you are part of any political party, you've got to, toe the party line. You've got to please your superiors in that way. I don't know.
Politics is fucked, isn't it? Then I just want like a fucking normal Joe Soap who's gonna, you know what I mean?
But he doesn't get to make deals with any. Politics is a fucking dirty game, man.
It's really dirty.
And you know what comes down to? It comes down to I need money for that new road that's gonna.
But that's the point I'm making. It is really dirty, and I was surprised. You're dead right. I was surprised how dirty it was. Like I was surprised. Like he survived a bill of no confidence over the €2 billion children's hospital. Yeah. And like this guy, for me, I'm just like, he's out of his depth. And if he just survived, so he survived his handling of the cervical check thing, which apparently he was criticised heavily for. He survived this bill of no confidence over the $2 billion overspend of the children's hospital. And that's in 2018, 2019. And again, I just, not necessarily in this like, I know what I'm getting, but part of me subconsciously, and they don't even say it to each other, it's just like, oh, let's just set this up for ourselves. Because that's their, I think that might be their sort of default setting, because they are exactly what we're saying, career politicians. So the default setting or the way their mind works is just like, how do I get ahead?
I think the mindset is, look, I have the power, I'm in power now. If everybody just falls behind me, everything will be sweet. And in a way, I guess that's kind of, to an extent, true. That if the entire country just unilaterally, if we were like Japan in the fucking 30s, and we just unilaterally obeyed every directive, from the emperor in this case,
didn't even eat meat.
Huh? Did they not?
It was against the law to eat meat in Japan for something like 200 years. That's why they eat so much. That's where sushi came from.
Oh, okay. I didn't know it was against the law. That's crazy.
Emperor and an imperial decree.
Decree. There you go. Yeah, but they're just the kind of unilateral, adherence.
But I don't want to live in a world that has unilateral.
We never
adherence.
fucking will, man. I don't think.
I hope.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm worried about.
But I'm saying that's what their mentality is. Their mentality is, it's my way or the highway. Look, everybody falls in line. Everybody gets on board. And it's a kind of a, come on, guys, we'll all reap the benefits. I'm going to lead us to the promised land, but I'm going to fucking lead us, man. Yeah. We're all going to get there, but
single file, bitches.
Got to follow me, and if you don't, then you can fuck off into the desert. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing, right, to touch on. Because and this is a thing that sort of irks me, is that a thing that comes up all the time is that, no, we know that this isn't going to stop coronavirus. We just don't want to destroy the health service or overcrowd and put too much pressure on the health service. Yeah. Now, I made a point that there's 5 million people living in this country. From a governance standpoint, you talked to my brother who works for the UN, and he said, from a governance standpoint, Ireland's a walk in the park, because actually we've very small number of demographics. So for, like, as in the majority of people, like, you don't have too many demographics to cater to worry about. The majority of people are fucking white. Yeah, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you don't have to care about your demographics. I'm just saying, in other countries where there are so many more and such larger populations of different demographics, then governance by default becomes a bit harder because you have to accommodate a wider scope of ideals. Say that's not the case in this country. Plus, we have 5 million people, which is a small population, and we have a 300 billion euro economy. So GDP. So it's not. It should be an easy fucking job. Yeah. And like these lads are on hundreds of grand a year. This is the thing that I'm like, what?
Yeah, the money is supposed to be there to attract the brightest and the best.
That's a private sector thing or a public sector thing. But if you need to, like, that's not the politician's job, I don't find. I think that the politician is just the delegator almost, the manager, because it's just like, if you need to have someone to work on this housing scheme, yeah, and you need to get the money to get the number one guy, I understand that. But I mean, he's not, what level of expertise does Simon Harris have? He's a college dropout. He dropped straight out doing journalism to go and be an aide for whatever her name is.
That's weird, because I always had this impression of Simon Harris. He was like the guy in your class.
I have more of an education.
Huh?
I have more of an education than Simon Harris. I have a leaving cert and I have a higher diploma. He doesn't even have that, man.
Yeah, I think it is leaving cert.
He's got his leaving cert, but he doesn't have any further
Degree
education.
above that, okay. Yeah.
And he's now the Minister for Higher Education.
It's funny because when I look at him, I just see the guy who everyone used to rob the homework off.
I see a napkin that someone blew their nose in. That's what I see every time I see him. A snotty rag.
Jesus, yeah.
He's like, Jesus.
Well, I'll say one thing for him, right? The stress of the job, so unless he's dyeing his hair grey, the stress of the job certainly seems to have done a number on him.
No, he has Crohn's disease or something.
Okay, does he? Yeah.
Yeah. You asshole, then.
Crohn's disease.
Yeah, he has Crohn's disease, I think. Anyway, I don't give a fuck. You insensitive piece of shit. No, but hold on. Okay, but just let me get a point out here. Just let me get a...
Leave the guy alone. Leave the poor.
Oh, fuck him, man. It's Crohn's disease. Let me get a point out here, right? Is that we are now... so, like, here's the thing. If we're not implementing lockdowns to get rid of the coronavirus, but we're actually implementing them to not put any pressure on the health service, I start to call bullshit. Because he got paid upwards of 100 grand a year to preside over the health service. In his tenure, the outpatient list grew by 33%, and look into it. There are many inadequacies in his tenure as Minister for Health. And people would defend Simon Harris and say, he inherited it. He inherited a shit show. Do you know who he inherited it from? Do you know?
The other Fianna Fáil.
Leo Varadkar. Fianna Fáil haven't had a Minister for Health. Fianna Fáil haven't been in government from 2011 to 2020. They were out for 9 years.
That's actually mad, isn't it?
Yeah, and they're still, Micheál Martin is still the leader of the opposition of Ireland. And for 9 years, anyway. And so, this is where it starts to stink for me. Because it's like, what actually you're saying is my job and the 500,000 other people losing their jobs right now are not as important as one man on over 100 grand a year who is not qualified to do the job he gets paid exponential amounts of money to do. And I'm going, and people are going, well, it was a tough job. He inherited it from the other dickhead who's telling me, from Leo Varadkar. You know, that's been a Fine Gael. Fine Gael presided over the health service for 9 years. And now me and 500,000 other people are meant to go to the wall and go to bat for the greater good. When them pieces of shit, and I'm sorry, I'm after getting a bit hot here, but it's really fucking upsets me, that them lads have after given themselves a 10% raise in the midst of this pandemic. When all they're doing is taking focus away from the fact that they're not qualified to do the job in the first place. That makes me actually sick. That point. And I think that's a valid point. And that's not a conspiracy theory. I think if you look at it and are honest about it, that makes sense. And that's a real fucking thing.
Am I just so jaded that I just don't expect any better from
I don't know. I think probably, honestly, Len, I think you're not as cynical. I think you're more positive than me, because I've seen it in conversations I have. And I'm not, I'm not criticising that, far from it. I'm sort of going, that's a great way to be, because I think you look at things from a more open perspective, potentially.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
I've just noticed a couple of times where I'm fucking getting hot and you're going, yeah, well, Ruben, don't. And I respect that.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to be. Anyway, look, that's just...
What would you, can I ask you this? What would you like to see, Ruben? Like, what would you like to see?
I would like to see... Well, let me just say one thing. Another person who this is a situation of is advantage. Another person who is doing well out of this is Stephen Donnelly, and we know he is nothing but a piece of shit. And so I'm not even going to bother talking about that fucking asshole. Because you want to talk about an ultimate career politician, a man who made his money, a man who cut his teeth, who was put in a position to become an independent by slating Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil in the Indo, I think. We didn't know who Stephen Donnelly was until he did that, and he just flip-flopped straight away. The most career politician.
What was his party again? Didn't he have his own
He was
party?
independent, then he set up the Social Democrats, and as soon as Fianna Fáil showed him how it could be, he went straight away. Vincent Brown took him apart. We're talking about a man who we wouldn't know who he was. He made his... He made his own political capital as an independent by slating Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil.
Isn't that the exact example of there's the centre of power, and he was on the outside talking the truth.
Okay, yeah.
And then they went, we can part the sea here and open you a channel, and he just fucking went right.
But for me, that's a human being, and I would say this to his face, with zero integrity. Basically,
yeah, I mean,
zero.
I to be honest, man, I agree with you. But to play devil's advocate here, as I'm sure he would say in this situation,
I know. Maybe I know what you're going to sort of say, but please say it.
You know, this is the chance for him to actually do something. This is a chance for him to actually.
I knew that's exactly what you were going to say.
Yeah.
I knew. I can't really affect real change as an independent. You had your own fucking party, mate. You went from independent to Social Democrat. You're a scumbag.
Trampolines, Ruben.
But you just asked me, all of what I've just said there is how I feel that this situation is potentially benefiting our politicians. And again, I've dominated this podcast, I know that.
No, man.
And I've gotten hot and heavy with it, but I'm actually worried about these things. Or I actually want... You said, what would I like to see, Len?
Yeah.
I would like to see a few things. I would like to see real clarity of data. Like, real clarity of data. Like, how many people... What is the growth in suicide? What is the growth in institutionalized people? What is the growth in defaults on mortgages? What is the growth on heart disease, cancer rates? Like, I want that clarity of data to get a fully transparent picture so that we can actually make a realistic decision on the effects, the benefits of lockdown. Because obviously, if all of that stuff starts to outweigh how many people actually die from coronavirus or can even potentially die from coronavirus, then what is the conversation even about? So I would like to see real clarity of data, because I might be wrong. I could be wrong. But I would like to see the clarity of data that sort of gives us a transparent picture. I'd like to know more about the test. I'd like to know about the amplifications and the primers that woman was talking about. I'd like to know. Most importantly, I would like to see a space for alternative conversations. I don't want to live in a world where we just shout people down and focus on, try to belittle or diminish what could potentially be real en masse social issues for people by saying, you're crazy, you're a conspiracy theorist.
One of them. You're one of that group.
You're an anti-vaxxer, whatever this is. I would just want to kill that attitude. And like, there were potentially crazy people that we spoke to the other day protesting the lockdown, or potentially, like I said, crazy is derogatory, people with potentially far out ideals, too far out for me to get on board with. I think that woman who jogged past us and didn't know what the fuck was happening in her own community, and the bigger picture, what was potentially happening for her own country, men and women, I think she's equally crazy or equally far out. And I suppose I just want to bridge that gap, or I just want to, because no one's ridiculing her. There's no picture of her in the paper going, this stupid bitch doesn't even know people are upset.
Yeah.
And so again, and I would like to see more cohesion. I would like to see people, like I would like us to identify the one common social issue, and this is for the people who are on. So sorry. In general, I would like to just find a place for conversation where you don't just shout down and call people who want to discuss other parameters of the situation crazy or conspiracy theorists or no, whatever it is, and that does happen.
Or by the same token, blind, or that they're sheep or sheeple in quotes.
Totally, yeah.
And like your man was saying, that look at this fucking idiot or whatever. It's that thing of everyone who thinks the way I think. I already know everyone who thinks the way I think is right, and therefore, if you think something different, then we're starting with you being wrong.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's exactly, and again,
Can
and that
we
goes
all
on
just
both
admit
sides.
nobody fucking knows.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
And I mean, but like I've already said it. Like the guy who I thought had valid points, and he's probably on this from a from an ideals point of view, or there's ways in which me and that man are totally aligned. Our ideals are totally aligned in some ways, right? But at the same time, I will say to you, you shouldn't fucking point and ridicule people on the other side. Like, I do think that we need to have real conversation, because that guy's not my enemy, and I'm not his enemy, and the young man pushing his buggy down the road with a mask on is not his enemy. I think the people I've discussed in this situation are your enemy. Like, I think the Leo Varadkar, Micheál Martin, Stephen Donnelly and Simon Harris, I think they are potentially your enemy. And then, if they are potentially your enemy, would it not be within our best interest to show some sort of cognitive resistance, to question the narrative some bit? Because I just don't see... And again, like you said, that's a brilliant point you've made there, Len, about the circle of truth. And they can't see our truth. No. Because even take them out of their political sphere or whatever, and I speak all the time about the real division is between have and have-nots. Like, when you're sitting in your gaff, in your nice, big, massive house, and you've got food and money and nothing else really matters, then... I've totally lost my point.
No, man, that's it. You want to shut out the outside world, because why would you? You've got yours.
Yeah, and even less malevolent than that. You're just like, but sure, this is the truth, because this is my truth. And
yeah.
But as a politician, surely, 2 minutes.
2 hours.
Right. Okay. We're literally wrapping it up. As a politician, surely it's your point. I don't know. I just want to question.
Can I say this actually? Just while this occurs to me, there's a great, the ancient Celtic myths of the Táin and Cuchulainn and all that shit, right? Well, there was the king of Ulster was called Conchobar, and they tell this great story about when he came to power. His mother, I think, begot him of some wise man or whatever, and anyway, she somehow worked some machinations to get him onto the throne. She slept with the king or whatever, put him on the throne for it was only going to be on the throne for 6 months. And what he did was he took all the land and property off half the population and gave it to the other half. And they became incredibly loyal to him. And that's how he was able to stay king.
Clever.
Isn't that fucking... Doesn't that sort of say it all? That as long as the people who own the shit are on your side...
Then you're laughing.
You're laughing. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, but we need to maybe tear that down and build it so that it's not... So that we all have shit.
Yeah.
Just an interesting point
we need to live up to the things we already fucking say we are and that we do. And
exactly.
If somebody claims they care about something... Like, if a politician actually came into power going, look, I'm only fucking after myself. I'll build the road. I'll get you that train station. But at the end of the day, I'm looking after number one here. I would almost vote for that cunt.
He was honest.
At least
he was transparent.
Yeah, exactly.
I get what you're saying. But, just in the interest of transparency, have a think about this. And just think about this. If politicians and other sort of technocratic figures like doctors or immunologists or whatever, if people are advancing their own social, financial standing, if trillions of dollars are being funneled into the pockets of the richest and therefore by default the most powerful people on earth, do you think they want that to change? And that's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. Yeah, do they? Yeah. I mean, I think it will end eventually, but they're going to make sure that they're
on the right side of it when it does.
When it fucking does.
That's it. Look, one really important thing, and again, you said what I liked. Let's just try and have a listen to each other. And
Yeah.
even when you see something that at a glance looks like out there, a conversation will determine whether it is or not.
Keep your eyes open, keep your ears, well, they just sort of stay open anyway, don't they, really? So,
All right, bud.